This line is for first-class passengers only, ma'am. You need to step aside. Are you sure you didn't accidentally book the wrong fare class? Because we can move you down to economy. Right now. Digital tickets can be stolen, ma'am. I'm going to need additional verification before I can allow you to board. Your appearance does not match what we typically see in first class. There is a concern. Take your hand off me. 5 sentences. 5 strangers. 5 different uniforms. All of them spoken to the same woman. In the same 8 hours. Inside one airport, one jet bridge, one cabin. Each one believed they were doing their job. Each one was about to lose it. Her name is BILLIONAIRE. 48 years old. Born in a 2-room apartment in Oakland. Daughter of a school janitor and a hotel cleaner. The kind of childhood the world rarely turns into a fairy tale. But this morning, she is the wealthiest passenger on flight 9-0-0-2 to London. By a margin no one on board can imagine. And the crew has just decided, without knowing any of it, that she does not belong in their cabin. Before we go further, do something simple for me. Subscribe to this channel. Stay with me through the last sentence. And in the comments, tell me which city you are listening from. Because what this woman is about to do, in the next 48 hours, will quietly dismantle an empire. Now let me take you back. To the first sentence. The first sneer. The first quiet, polite, perfectly trained piece of racism. That set everything in motion. She had been awake for 23 hours. The red eye from San Francisco, delayed twice. The connection in Denver, almost missed. Now she stood at JFK, running on nothing but black coffee, and a thin, fragile hope, that she could collapse into her first-class seat for the next 7 hours over the Atlantic, and let the entire world disappear. She had dressed down on purpose. No watch. No jewelry. No name on her bag. No badge on her chest. Used the most comfortable clothes she owned. Plain jeans. Worn travel sneakers. An oversized gray hoodie. The kind of outfit that did not announce wealth. The kind that did not announce power. The kind that did not announce, in any way, at the woman wearing them owned more of Aura Airways than any single person on earth. That was the point. 3 weeks earlier, her firm, Laurent Capital, had quietly closed the deal. 3 weeks earlier, she had become the largest single shareholder of one of the most recognizable airlines in the country. 3 weeks earlier, she had told her board exactly what she intended to do next. She would fly the flagship route. Anonymous. Unannounced. No PR escort. No advance call to operations. She wanted to see how the company she now owned actually treated the people who paid for it. When nobody important was watching. She had not expected the ugliness to arrive this fast. The check-in counter at Terminal 7 was staffed by a young man named Cal. He looked up from his screen with the practiced smile of someone who had been told, from his first day on the job, to always smile. The smile reached his face. It did not reach his eyes. It never reached his eyes, once he actually saw her. His gaze did that small, casual scan. Face. Clothes. Back. Face again. Vivian had felt that scan thousands of times in her 48 years. She did not flinch. She did not react. She simply watched, the way a scientist watches a known reaction in a known solution. The smile thinned. The warmth evaporated. Whatever script Cal had been trained to read from, was quietly tucked back into his pocket. Ticket and passport, he said. Flatly. She handed them over without a word. She watched his face as he scanned the documents. She watched the micro-expressions flicker across him like a slideshow no one had told him was visible. Confusión. Ten suspición. Then a particular, ugly kind of disbelief, that did not bother to hide itself. There must be some mistake, he said. Not looking at her. His fingers tapped rapidly on the keyboard. This ticket is showing first class. I think there's been an error in our system. No error, Vivian said quietly. That's my seat. Keely's jaw tightened. He glanced at the screen. Then at her. Then at the screen again. As if he could shame the database into apologizing for what it was telling him. Ma'am, first-class tickets are extremely expensive. Are you sure you didn't book the wrong fare class? He could move you down to economy right now. Sabe you the embarrassment? The woman behind her in line made a small, sharp sound. Kyle ignored it. His attention was locked on Vivian with the heavy certainty of a man who had already decided what was happening, and was now only in the business of confirming it. The ticket is correct, Vivian said again. Her voice did not rise. Her voice did not waver. First class. Sea 2A. I'm going to have to verify this with my supervisor. He picked up the phone without waiting for her response. He turned his shoulder away. He did not lower his voice nearly enough. Yeah, it's Cal at counter 12. eBay got a situation. Passenger claiming first class. I think we might have a fraud case. Can you come take a look? Vivian's fingers tightened around the handle of her carry-on. Used slightly. Used enough. She had expected friction. That was why she had come. But the casual cruelty of it. The easy, automatic assumption that she could not possibly belong. The speed with which a young man had decided her presence inside this land was a crime in progress, hit harder than she had prepared herself for. A woman in her 50s approached the counter. Supervisor Bach. The kind of face that had spent decades perfecting the art of looking down at people, without ever appearing to lower her chin. What seems to be the problem? She did not look at Vivian when she said it. This passenger, Cal said. The word passenger came out like something he had picked up with tongs. As a ticket showing first class. But I'm concerned about verification. The supervisor finally turned. Her gaze was clinical. Empty. Stripped of the courtesy airline staff were trained to extend to every customer. Let alone a first-class one. Do you have a credit card matching the name on this ticket? Either. Vivian pulled out her wallet. Slowly. She placed a matte black card on the counter. The kind of card that does not need to introduce itself. The supervisor lifted it with exaggerated care. Examined it like a forgery in a museum. Handed it back. This does not prove you purchased this ticket. Though. You have a receipt? A confirmation email. It's all digital, Vivian said. The confirmation number is on your screen. Digital tickets can be transferred. They can be stolen. The supervisor crossed her arms. I am going to need additional verification before I can allow you to board this flight. The woman behind Vivian finally spoke up. Are you serious right now? I have been standing here for 10 minutes, watching you harass this woman. Check her ID. Check her ticket. Let her through. So many of us have flights to catch. The supervisor's face flushed. She did not back down. Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you not to interfere with airline security procedures. Security procedures. The woman laughed. It was a short, bitter laugh. That is what you are calling this. I fly first class every single week. I have never once been asked for a receipt. I have never once been asked for additional verification. What this is discrimination. Plan. And simple. Kyle had gone pale. We are just following protocol. Your protocol is racist, the woman said. And you know it. A small crowd had gathered now. Other passengers slowing down. Phones lifting. That particular hum, again. The hum that says, someone is recording. Someone is going to remember. The supervisor leaned in, dropped her voice to a strained whisper. Ma'am. I will give you one last chance to resolve this quietly. If you purchase this ticket legitimately, I am sure we can verify that. But it will take time. Or I can offer you a complimentary upgrade to premium economy on the next available flight. That seems like a fair compromise. A fair compromise, Vivian repeated. She let the word hang in the air. Taste it. Let everyone within earshot taste it. Do you want me to give up the first-class seat I paid for? Do you want me to wait 4 hours for the next flight? Do you want me to accept a downgrade? And do you want me to do all of this, because you have decided that I do not belong in first class? I didn't say that, the supervisor said quickly. You didn't have to. Vivian pulled out her phone. Her voice did not shake. It did not need to. I am going to need your names. Both of you. And your employee identification. Numbers. Kyle and the supervisor exchanged a glance. Something passed between them. A silent recalculation. The first real flicker of doubt. That won't be necessary, the supervisor said. Her tone had shifted now. Conciliatory. Polite. The way professionals talk when they suddenly suspect they may have made a mistake. I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Kyle. Processeme ese, Laurent's ticket. Kyle's hands shook as he printed the boarding pass. He slid it across the counter without making eye contact. The muscle in his jaw kept twitching, as if it could not decide whether he was angry or afraid. Vivian picked up the boarding pass. Picked up her carry-on. Walked away without another word. She did not turn around. But she had their names. She had their faces. She had everything she needed. The first-class lounge was nearly empty when she arrived. A handful of business travelers, scattered among the leather chairs, absorbed in laptops, the quiet hum of expense accounts filling the air. Vivian found a seat near the window. She pulled out her phone. She had 3 hours of voice memos to transcribe. The check-in had not been the first incident of the day. It had only been the loudest. There was the TSA agent who had pulled her out of the pre-check lane, despite her status. The lounge attendant who had asked to see her boarding pass. Twice. The bartender who had quietly suggested she try a well drink, instead of the top-shelf vodka, as if her order had been a mistake to be corrected. Each one, alone, could be explained away. A coincidence. A misunderstanding. A bad shift. But Vivian had been doing this work long enough to know something very simple. Patterns are not random. Discrimination rarely arrives wearing a hood. More often, it arrives dressed in professional courtesy. Wearing the language of reasonable concern. Hidden inside policies and procedures, that somehow always apply more strictly, to some people, than to others. She was deep in her notes when a voice broke the quiet. Excuse-me. Is this seat taken? She looked up. A man, perhaps in his early 70s, stood by the chair across from her. Impeccable three-piece suit. Silver hair, neatly combed. His smile was warm and genuine. And very obviously a smile that had not been calibrated for her, specifically. It was simply how he looked at people. It's all yours, she said. He settled in with a soft sigh of relief. Martin Wentworth. London. Vivian Laurent. Same flight, I'd imagine. They shook hands. His grip was firm, without being aggressive. The handshake of a man who had spent a lifetime in business, but had never forgotten how to treat a human being like one. First time flying Aura, he asked. First time in a while, she said carefully. You fly them often. Every week. 15 years. Corporate account. I ordered a scotch. Then turned back to her. They used to be excellent. Best in the industry. But lately, he trailed off, shook his head. Standards have slipped. How so? I leaned back. His expression turned thoughtful. The planes are still beautiful. The amenities are still there. But the culture has gone somewhere. The staff feels less engaged. More like they are going through the motions, than actually caring about anyone. Like they forgot, that this is a service industry. You are not moving cargo. You are taking care of people. Vivienne took mental notes. This was exactly the kind of feedback no internal survey would ever capture. Not from a consultant. Not from a quarterly report. From a loyal customer, who had simply been watching, year after year, as something he loved had quietly soured. Martin tilted his head. You know, you look familiar. Have we met? She felt her pulse quicken. Used slightly. She kept her face still. I don't think so. You just have one of those faces. I did not look convinced. But he was a gentleman. I let it drop. What line of work are you in? Investment, she said. Which was technically true. Organizational dynamics. Corporate culture. That sort of thing. He says lit up. Fascinating. So, you study how companies work from the inside. Something like that. They talked for 20 minutes, and Vivienne found herself genuinely enjoying it. Martin was sharp. Funny. Surprisingly progressive for a man of his generation. He told stories about the golden age of flying, when staff were trained to treat every passenger like they mattered. That's what's missing now, he said, finishing his second scotch. That sense that the people working for these companies actually give a damn. It is all metrics now. All efficiency. All cost cutting. And somewhere along the way, they forgot. Then the boarding announcement came over the speaker. They walked to the gate together. Martin was telling her about a flight, years ago, where the entire first-class cabin had been upgraded to a circus troupe, complete with a small, very polite elephant. She was laughing for the first time all day, when they reached the gate agent. The agent, a young woman with a tight smile, scanned Martin's boarding pass without comment. When Vivienne stepped forward, the smile vanished. "You need to see your ID again." Vivienne handed it over. The agent examined it with theatrical care. Held it up to the light. Compared the photo to Vivienne's face. 3 times. 4 times. "This doesn't look like you," the agent said. Martin, already past the gate, stopped and turned. "That's the problem." "No problem, sir," the agent said. Her voice softened completely. The same voice, 2 different temperatures, depending on which face it was aimed at. Used routine verification. Her boarding pass was already scanned, Martin said. "What more verification do you need?" The agent's face tightened. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to proceed to the aircraft. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me," Martin said. "If you are harassing my traveling companion." His voice had gone cold. All the warmth from the lounge evaporated. The voice of a man who had, in his time, made careers. And broken them. "I have been flying Aura for 15 years. I have never seen a gate agent question someone's ID, after their boarding pass has already been validated. So I am going to ask you, very directly, what is really going on here?" The agent's eyes darted between Martin, Vivienne, and the line forming behind them. She looked, suddenly, very young. "I am just following security protocols." "Then follow them for everyone," Martin said. "I have not seen you scrutinize a single other ID today." A man in an order uniform stepped over. His badge said customer service supervisor. He took the boarding pass and the ID. Glanced at them for perhaps 2 seconds. Handed them back to Vivian. Everything appears to be in order. My apologies for the delay, Miss Laurent. Please proceed to board. The gate agent looked like she wanted to argue. One sharp look from the supervisor silenced her. Vivian walked through the jet bridge, Martin at her shoulder, every phone behind them held just a little too high to be casual. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Yes I did, Martin said. I am an old white man, flying first class. No one ever questions whether I belong here. That is exactly why I have to speak up, when I see them questioning someone who does. Otherwise, the silence belongs to me too. Vivian thought about that line for a long time afterward. The silence belongs to me too. She stepped onto the aircraft. She did not yet know that the worst part of the day was still ahead of her. The cabin was warm. Lit in that pale amber glow airlines used to make people feel calm, while charging them $5,000 to feel it. Vivian stepped through the curtain into first class, her boarding pass already scanned, her path to seat 2A clear. And then she met Meredith. The purser stood at the front of the cabin like a woman guarding the gate of a private garden. 22 years in the industry. You could read it on her. The crisp uniform. The precise hair. The thin, practiced smile, perfectly designed for the people she had decided, in advance, were the right kind of people. Vivian, in her view, was not one of them. You need to step aside, ma'am. This line is for first-class passengers only. The same sentence. From a different voice. In a different room. This is becoming a theme, Vivian thought. You have a first-class boarding pass, she said evenly. Seat 2A. Meredith has performed their full inventory. From the sneakers, slowly upward. She did not bother to hide it. Maya see it. Vivian handed it over. Meredith examined it. Frowned it. Examined it again. The boarding pass had already cleared 3 checkpoints. They both knew that. They both knew exactly what this was. You need to verify this. Meredith said. It has been verified. 3 times. In the last 90 minutes. You verify it again. Martin had reached his seat. He was watching now. His briefcase half tucked under the seat in front of him. He says very, very still. Meredith disappeared toward the galley. Vivian stood in the aisle. Other first-class passengers boarded around her now, slipping past, glancing, registering, looking away. The young flight attendant by the galley, Angela, according to her name tag, met Vivian's eyes for a single, apologetic second. Before lowering her own. Vivian had seen that look before too. It was the look of someone who had already decided that whatever was about to happen, was not their problem. Meredith returned. Ma'am. I am going to need you to step back into the jet bridge while we sort this out. Why? Because there is some confusion regarding your seating. And I cannot have passengers blocking the aisle while we resolve it. There is no confusion, Vivian said quietly. There is a seat. There is a boarding pass. There is a system that has approved both. What there is you. Meredith's mouth tightened. Excuse me. You heard me. The cabin had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet that arrives when 40 strangers all decide, at the same moment, that this is now a story they will tell at dinner parties. Meredith reached forward. She did not just gesture. She closed her fingers around Vivian's upper arm. Lightly, at first. Then firmly. Ma'am. I am asking you to step back. Take your hand off me, Vivian said. She did not raise her voice. She did not move. The words landed with the cold, level weight of a gavel. Meredith hesitated. For a single second, she actually considered tightening her grip. Then Martin stood up. Get your hand off her. Now. Meredith released the arm. She took half a step back. Her face had gone red, then white, then red again. She turned toward Angela. Tell the captain we have a security situation in first class. Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. Vivienne reached, slowly, deliberately, into her bag. She made sure every person in that cabin could see exactly what she was doing. She pulled out her passport. Her driver's license. Her platinum card. And then, her Aura Airways executive black tier card. A small, matte black sliver of plastic. Fewer than 50 people in the world had ever been issued one. She laid them out on the tray table beside C2A. In a row. Like cards. In a quiet, devastating game. Vivienne Laurent, she said. Her voice carried, gently, all the way to row 12. Born March 14, 1978. San Francisco. Member number 001. On the executive black program. Which means I have flown more than 4 million miles with this airline. Everything matches. Everything is real. So. I ask you one more time, Meredith. What, exactly, is the security concern here? Meredith stared down at the cards. Vivienne watched her face calculate. Watched her try to find the door out of the room she had just walked into. I need to verify these with the captain, Meredith said finally. Do it, Vivienne said. Call him. Have him come down here. Let's have this conversation with everyone present. For the first time, Meredith looked, fully and unmistakably, uncertain. The captain came. His name was Reynolds. Late 50s. 60 years with Aura. He had the kind of weathered face that had managed crises at 30,000 feet for so long, that nothing surprised him anymore. He picked up the documents on the tray table one by one. Passport. License. Credit card. Then the executive black card. His eyebrows lifted half a millimeter. Member number 001, he said quietly. I have flown for this airline for 3 decades. I have never, ever, seen a number that low. That is because there are only 50 active cards under the number 100, Vivienne said. They are reserved for the airline's most valuable customers. People who have flown exclusively with Aura. People who have invested, significantly, in the company. Reynolds turned to Meredith. What irregularity were you concerned about? Meredith's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. The passenger's appearance does not match what we typically see in first class. There was suspicion at check-in that the ticket might have been fraudulently obtained. I concurred. Suspicion from whom? The check-in agent. The gate agent. And my own observation. Reynolds did not respond for several seconds. The cabin did not breathe. Then he turned to Vivienne. His voice softened, only slightly. Ms. Laurent. My apologies for the delay. Please, take your seat. He turned back to Meredith. My office. After we land. We will be having a long conversation. But Meredith was not finished. Vivienne could see it. There was a particular kind of person who had built her entire identity around being right. Around being the gatekeeper who kept things in their proper places. Such people did not surrender simply because authority had told them to. Such people doubled down. Always. Captain. With respect. I have been in this industry for 22 years. I know when something does not add up. This passenger has been evasive. Confrontational. Refused to cooperate with standard verification. I have answered every question, Vivian said. The voice was quiet now. Almost gentle. Which somehow made it worse. I have produced every document. What I have refused to do, is accept being treated like a criminal. For sitting in a seat I paid for. Angela touched Meredith's arm. Maybe we should just move on. We relate. Meredith pulled her arm away. No. Something is wrong here. I can feel it. Reynolds's voice dropped into a very dangerous calm. Meredith. I am giving you a direct order. Return to your station. Complete your pre-flight duties. We will discuss this matter in detail after we land. Am I clear? Captain, I really think. Am I clear? Crystal, Captain. She turned. Walked back to the galley. Each step rigid. Furious. Humiliated. Reynolds looked at Vivian for one long moment. There was something in his face. Recognition, perhaps. Or embarrassment. Or both. Miss Laurent. I apologize for what just happened in this cabin. This is not how Aura Airways trains its staff to treat passengers. Isn't it? Vivian asked. It did not answer. It couldn't. Because they both knew the truth. This was, in fact, exactly how staff had been trained. Not in any manual. Not in any written policy. But in the unwritten lessons. The unspoken understandings. The quiet rules about who belonged where. Who was worth difference. Who was worth scrutiny. And who would never be challenged at all. The captain returned to the cockpit. The cabin door closed. The safety demonstration began. Angela performed the gestures. Meredith stood in the galley with her back to the passengers. Her shoulders rising and falling in tight, controlled jerks. That might have been rage. Or might have been the first cracks of something much larger. Vivian pulled out her phone. She started writing. Once the plane was airborne and the seatbelt sign turned off, Angela appeared with the drink cart. She approached Vivian's row with her hands trembling. Can I get you something to drink? She whispered. Sparkling water, please. Angela poured the water with the care of someone defusing a small bomb. She slid the glass onto the tray table with a folded napkin. Vivian looked at the napkin. There were 3 small words written on it, in hurried pen. I'm sorry. Sis not usually this bad. Vivian looked up at Angela. Angela's eyes were begging. Begging for understanding. For absolution. For some confirmation that she was a different category from Meredith. One of the good ones. Vivian had heard that excuse her entire life. She is not usually like this. A is not normally that way. This is not who we really are. As if bigotry were a sudden allergic reaction. As if it were a momentary lapse, rather than a feature, deeply embedded in the system itself. How long have you been flying with Aura? Vivian asked softly. 6 months. This is my first international route. In those 6 months. How many times have you watched Meredith treat passengers like this? Angela's face drained of color. I don't know what you mean. Yes you do, Vivian said. You know exactly what I mean. Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes. I need this job. I have student loans. I can't afford to make waves. And how many passengers, Vivian asked, can't afford to be treated like criminals on a flight they paid for? How many people have suffered because you and everyone else decided that keeping your jobs was more important than doing what was right? Angela fled back to the galley without another word. Vivian watched her go. She felt the old, familiar weight of it. The frustration. The guilt. The recognition that Angela was young. Scared. Trapped inside a system that punishes the whistleblower more harshly than it punishes the bigot. But she also knew that nothing, ever, changes. Until someone decides that comfort is no longer the highest value. Martín leaned across the aisle. That was brutal. Necessary. Sometimes brutal, Vivian said, is the only language people understand. The flat settled into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Meals were served. Vivian's arrived noticeably later than everyone else's. Without the signature first-class plating. Without garnish. Without care. A standard container. Lukewarm. Hastily assembled. She photographed it. Tim estan pedit. Made a note. Other passengers were starting to notice. The woman in 3C kept glancing over, her expression troubled. The businessman across the aisle wore the face of a man recalculating his loyalty program. Even those who had quietly sided with Meredith at the start, who might have shared her assumptions in the privacy of their own heads, were beginning to understand the shape of what was happening. 3 hours into the flight, Meredith emerged from the galley carrying a bottle of champagne. She refilled glasses with her best smile. Laughed warmly with passengers. Projected, for all the world to see, the polished image of perfect service. When she reached Vivian's row, she walked past without acknowledgement. Martín held up his empty flute. Actually, Meredith. I would prefer that you give my champagne to Miss Laurent. I am switching to water. Meredith's smile froze. I am sure Miss Laurent can request a beverage if she wants one. I am sure she could, Martin said. His voice had hardened again. But she should not have to. You should be offering her the same service you are offering everyone else. That is the job. Mr. Winthrop. I do not appreciate you telling me how to do my job. Andy, Martin said, do not appreciate watching you systematically exclude a passenger. Based on nothing more than your own prejudice. Now, are you going to pour her champagne? Or do I need to have another conversation with the captain? The cabin had gone silent. Again. Even the rows behind them. Phones, again, lifting. Meredith stood frozen in the aisle. The bottle in her hand. Her face cycling through 3 different colors. Each more dangerous than the last. Of course, she said finally. Through her teeth. She poured. Her hands shook. She spilled a few drops on the tray table. She did not offer a napkin. She did not apologize for the spill. She simply turned. And walked away. Her shoulders so tight they looked like they would crack. Vivian raised the glass to Martin in a silent toast. He returned it with a sad smile. You know what the worst part is, he said. After 22 years with this airline. Meredith has probably done this to hundreds of passengers. Maybe thousands. And nobody has ever stopped her. We don't yet know that today will be any different, Vivian said. But there was something in her voice now. Something colder than before. A decision had been made. Quietly. Privately. Inside her. The cabin lights dimmed. The flight passed into that long, hushed middle stretch, where airplanes seem to forget they are airplanes. Passengers slept. The hum of the engines became a kind of hymn. Vivian sat awake. Her notes growing. Around the 4-hour mark, she stood up to stretch. She walked toward the rear galley. She did not announce herself. She did not need to. She turned the corner just in time to see Meredith. Alone. Her back to the curtain. Her hand reaching into the liquor cabinet. A small, single-serving bottle. Pressed to her lips. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Long enough. Vivian lifted her phone. She did not need to focus. She did not need to think. The picture took itself. Meredith straightened. So here. For a long moment, the two women stared at each other in the dim, quiet galley of a plane traveling 600 miles per hour over the Atlantic. Meredith's eyes were red. "Do you think this is a game?" she whispered. "No," Vivian said. "I have never thought, for a single moment, this was a game." She walked back to her seat. She did not run. She did not hurry. She placed the phone face down on the tray table beside her cold dinner. And waited. She waited 90 minutes. She watched the timestamps tick. She let the photograph age into evidence. When the turbulence came, it came fast. The plane dropped 100 feet without warning. Someone screamed. The seatbelt sign flashed back on. The drink cart was loose in the aisle. Angela had been pouring coffee for an elderly gentleman in 4B. The cart rolled. She grabbed for it. She lost her footing. She went down hard. Her forearm bent at an angle the human arm is not supposed to bend at. There was a sound. Then a different kind of silence. A doctor in row 5 unbuckled and was at her side in 15 seconds. He held her wrist. Steadied her. Called her name. Someone shouted for us. Someone shouted for a blanket. The plane shook again. Passengers gripped their armrests. Meredith stood by the galley curtain. She did not move. For 5 full seconds, she stood frozen. Watching her colleague writhe on the floor. Watching a doctor she had never met do the job she had spent 22 years training for. Then, slowly, she walked to the intercom. Vivian saw it all. She had not stopped watching. It was, in that moment, as she made up her mind. She rose. Walked to the front of the cabin. Knocked on the cockpit door. Captain Reynolds opened it himself. He was clearly already aware. The reports had reached him. His face was tight. "Captain," Vivian said. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you are flying with one functioning flight attendant, while the other one is, at this moment, drunk on duty." And froze. "During a medical emergency. With 96 passengers on board." His eyes narrowed. "That is a serious accusation." "It is an accurate observation." She turned her phone around. She showed him the photograph. Time stampede. 96 minutes earlier. Meredith in the galley. The small bottle to her lips. Reynolds looked at the photograph for a long time. "Why," he said finally, "did you wait 90 minutes to bring this to me?" "Because, Vivian said. He needed to know. With absolute certainty. That this airline was not going to fix itself. He needed to be sure I had documented enough, that the system would not be able to lie about what had happened. Today. He have it now." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Reynolds stared at the photograph. Then he stared at her. Then he turned. Walked back into the cockpit. Closed the door behind him. 5 minutes later, the announcement came. "Ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Reynolds. Due to a medical emergency on board, and a crew safety concern, we are returning to John F. Kennedy International Airport. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." Groans rippled through the cabin. Missed connections. Recalculations. Vivian returned to her seat. Martin was watching her with very still, very knowing eyes. "You did that," he said. It was not a question. He gave the captain information he needed to make an informed decision. Information you held for 90 minutes. He was documenting, Vivian said. He was building. He needed evidence that could not be explained away. Or buried. Or quietly dismissed. By a human resources department that had buried it 47 times before. Martin looked troubled. That is a hard philosophy. It is, Vivian agreed. But it is the only philosophy that has ever, in my experience, actually changed anything. The plane began its long, slow turn back across the dark Atlantic. Mary disappeared in the aisle. Her face, mottled. Her hands, shaking. She moved through the cabin with jerky, aggressive motions. Slamming overhead bins. Yanking down window shades. When she reached Vivian's row, she stopped. Her voice was low. Pitched only for Vivian to hear. This is your fault. Vivian said nothing. You have been causing problems since you stepped on this plane. Making accusations. Turning passengers against me. And now you have cost this airline hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over a lie. It is not a lie, Vivian said calmly. And you know it. I know you came on board with an agenda. Meredith leaned closer. Vivian could smell the alcohol on her breath now. Sar. Stal. Resent. I know you have been documenting. I know you are planning something. But you have made a mistake. You got Angela hurt by distracting the crew. You have triggered an unnecessary turnaround. And when we land, I am going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Please, Vivian said. Though. Meredith straightened. Swat slightly. Caught herself on the seat back. Her knuckles white. You think you are so smart. You think you have won. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have friends at corporate. I have union representation. I have 22 years of perfect service records. And what do you have? A phone full of pictures. A victim complex. And the chip on your shoulder. I have the truth, Vivian said. Meredith laughed. It was an ugly laugh. The laugh of someone who could no longer hear how loud she had become. The truth. You want to talk about truth. The truth is that people like you are ruining this industry. You come in here with your attitude. Your entitlement. Playing the race card every time someone looks at you wrong. You make it impossible, for the rest of us, to do our jobs. The cabin had gone silent again. Every passenger within earshot was listening. Several phones were already lifted. Meredith was too drunk, or too angry, or too tired, to notice. I have been flying for 22 years. I have served millions of passengers. Millions. And in all that time, I have treated everyone with respect. Everyone. But passengers like you. You come looking for problems. You manufacture outrage. You twist every interaction into something it is not. So you can sue. So you can cash in. Is that what you think this is? Vivian asked quietly. A scam. What else could it be? You show up in first class dressed like you are going to the gym. You refuse standard procedures. You turn other passengers against the crew. You document everything like you are building a case. Meredith's voice dripped with contempt. I have seen this before. Passengers deliberately causing incidents. So they can claim discrimination. And Cashin Martin stood up. That is enough. You are drunk. You are unprofessional. You are about to make this very, very much worse for yourself. Sit down, Meredith snapped, or I will have you arrested for interfering with a flight crew. The only threat to safety on this flight, Martin said, is you. Everyone can see you are intoxicated. Everyone can smell it. You are impaired. You are abusive. And you have no business being responsible for the safety of anyone. Meredith's face went crimson. She opened her mouth to fire back. She never got the chance. A voice cut through the cabin from behind her. Meredith. Step away from the passengers. Now. Captain Reynolds had returned. His co-pilot stood just behind him. Both of them quiet. Both of them very still. The voice of a man who had given the order he had hoped he would not have to give. Captain, these passengers are being disruptive. Galley. Now. You are relieved of duty. You can't do that, Meredith protested. I am the senior purser. You need me to manage the cabin. What I need, Reynolds said evenly, is a sober, professional crew member. You are neither. Meredith looked around the cabin, searching for an ally. She found none. Even the passengers who had nodded along to her earlier insinuations now stared at her with the embarrassed, sober eyes of people who had just realized which side of the story they were going to remember being on. She walked back to the galley. The co-pilot followed. Captain Reynolds turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen. I sincerely apologize for what you have witnessed on this flight. This is not who we are. We will be on the ground at JFK in approximately 45 minutes. Our Airways representatives will meet us at the gate. Please remain in your seats. With your seat belts fastened. A turn to leave. Vivienne spoke quietly. Captain. One more thing. I looked at her, exhausted. I will need to speak with you. After we land. Privately. I hesitated. Then nodded. After we land. My office. The remaining 45 minutes of the flight passed in a strange, almost reverent silence. Passengers whispered. Several came over, one by one, to apologize to Vivienne for their silence. The woman from 3C handed her a card with a phone number. I have video, she said. I love it. The businessman in 1C offered to give a witness statement. A teenage girl from row 5 came forward and quietly asked if she could give Vivienne a hug. Vivienne led care. Sometimes brutal was the only language people understood. And sometimes, it was the only language that broke open. The plane touched down at JFK with a soft, almost apologetic bump. As passengers gathered their belongings, Meredith emerged from the galley one final time. Her eyes were red. Her makeup smudged. Her uniform disheveled. She looked, for the first time in 22 years, tired. She paused at Vivienne's row. This isn't over, she said quietly. There will be investigations. Hearings. Union representatives. You will have to prove every single thing you have accused me of. I can, Vivienne said. Every single accusation is documented. Time stamped. Witnessed. Meredith's face crumpled. For one moment, the armor cracked. And beneath it was something almost human. Fair. Real. Un disguised fair. I have a family, she said. A mortgage. 22 years of my life invested in this company. You are going to destroy all of that. Over a misunderstanding. This, Vivienne said, was not a misunderstanding. Her voice was no longer angry. It was tired. Soft. Almost mournful. This was systematic. You have been doing this for years. Because the system protected you. Because no one challenged you. How many passengers, Meredith? How many people experienced exactly what I experienced today? And did not have the resources. Or the platform. Or the energy left, to fight back. Meredith had no answer. She turned. She walked away. Her shoulders slumped. Her career, effectively ended, even if the paperwork had not yet caught up to the truth. Vivienne was the last passenger off the plane. She walked down the empty jet bridge and stepped into the terminal. 3 people were waiting for her. Captain Reynolds. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. And a man in his 60s whose face had already learned, in the last 20 minutes, what kind of evening this was going to be. Miss Laurent. The woman extended her hand. Patricia Chin. Vice President of Human Resources, Oro Airways. This is Robert Matthews, our Chief Operating Officer. Robert tried to speak. Vivienne held up one hand. Gently. Politely. And firmly. Conference room, she said. Now. They led her to a small room in the terminal. The door closed. Patricia pulled out a notepad with hands that were almost steady. Robert poured coffee with hands that were not. He would like to start, Patricia. Began, by apologizing on behalf of Oro Airways for what you have. Vivienne interrupted. Have you been told what happened today? The captain gave us a brief summary. Then you have not been told what happened. The captain saw 20 minutes of an 8-hour day. Sit down. I have something to show you. She connected her phone to the conference room display. For the next 90 minutes, she presented. Quietly. Methodically. Without raising her voice once. Photographs. Audio recordings. Video footage from other passengers, already in her cloud. Time stamped notes. Witness statements. A spreadsheet. Color-coded by incident, by employee name, by time of day. A pattern. Map. With the precision of someone who had done this work before. 3 times before, in fact. Robert's face grew paler with every slide. Patricia took notes faster and faster. Until she finally stopped taking notes. And simply sat back. Staring at the screen. This is, Patricia said finally. Extensive. And damning. We will need to launch a full investigation, of course. But based on what you have shown us, termination of the employees involved appears inevitable. Not just the employees, Vivienne said. This is a systemic problem. Meredith did not act alone. She was enabled by supervisors who ignored complaints. By a corporate culture that prioritized loyalty over accountability. By training programs that paid lip service to diversity. While doing nothing to address what was actually happening on the planes. You sound like, Robert said carefully, you have studied this. I have, Vivienne said. Extensively. It is part of my work. Which brings me to something I need to tell you. Something the captain does not know. Something no one on that flight today knew. Except me. She paused. Patricia and Robert leaned forward, almost in unison. 3 weeks ago, Vivienne said. My firm completed the acquisition of a controlling interest in Oro Airways. The room went very quiet. Patricia's pen slid from her fingers and rolled, soundlessly, across the table. I am the majority shareholder of this airline. I am, effective immediately upon board confirmation, the largest single owner of this company. Your CEO reports. To a board that reports, ultimately, to me. The flight I just took. Was a flight I took. As an owner. To see, with my own eyes. What I had bought. The color drained completely from Robert's face. Jure. Patricia said slowly. We weren't informed. That was deliberate, Vivienne said. He did not want anyone performing. He wanted to see how this company operates. When nobody important is watching. She gestured to the evidence still glowing on the screen. Now I know. Robert stood abruptly. His chair scraped the floor. Miss Laurent. He had no idea. If I had known who you were, I would have intervened immediately. He would have personally ensured. That, Vivienne said, is exactly the problem. She let the words land. You would have intervened for an owner. You would have ensured difference for someone important. But the question that matters is this. What about every passenger who experiences this every single day? What about the people who do not have $1 billion and a controlling stake? Do they not deserve the same intervention? The same concern? The same difference? Robert sank slowly back into his chair. He had no answer either. Within 90 minutes, the story broke wide. The woman from C3C had posted her video. 600,000 views in the first hour. 2 million by morning. Within a day, it was the lead story on every major network. Within a week, Vivian Loran's name was attached to a single, sharp idea, repeated across the country. Power is not freedom from discrimination. Power is the ability to do something about it. Before the terminations went out. Before the press conference. Before the lawyers got involved. There was a moment Vivian would carry with her for the rest of her life. The employees had begun to gather outside the crew lounge. Work had moved faster than corporate could keep up with. Flight attendants. Ground crew. Gate agents. Maintenance workers. Maybe 50 in total. Some had heard about the firings. Some had only heard rumors. All of them were waiting for the woman who had walked off the plane that afternoon. Patricia tried to stop her. This is a terrible idea. Some of those people will be hostile. Some will see you as the enemy. Someone who flew in undercover. Set people up. Destroyed careers. They might, Vivian agreed. But hiding in a conference room will not change that. If I am asking employees to be accountable for their behavior, you have to be accountable for mine. That means facing them. Directly. Face to face. She walked out into the terminal. The crowd parted to let her through. There was no applause. There were no cheers. Only that quiet, weary respect that crowds reserve for people they have not yet decided how to feel about. Vivian stepped up onto a low bench by the lounge entrance, so that everyone could see her. She did not have prepared remarks. She did not need them. My name is Vivian Loran, she began. Most of you are learning about me, for the first time, today. Under difficult circumstances. I owe you an explanation. A voice from the back. Sir. Angry. You owe us more than an explanation. You owe Meredith her job back. You owe Cal an apology. You set them up. You destroyed their careers. Vivian did not flinch. He documented their behavior, she said. Behavior that included physical contact. Denial of service. Systematic discrimination. That documentation is supported by witness testimony. By video. And by a pattern of complaints going back 14 years. He did not set anyone up. He gave them the opportunity to do their jobs professionally. They chose not to. You came in undercover. Another voice. That is entrapment. That is not fair. Fair to whom? Vivian asked. Was it fair to the passengers who experienced discrimination, but did not have the resources to fight back? Was it fair to the employees who reported problems and were ignored? Was it fair to the customers who paid premium prices for service they never received? Because of how they looked. A woman near the front spoke up. Her voice was shaking. I fly with Meredith all the time. She is a good person. She has kids in college. You just destroyed her life over a misunderstanding. 47 formal complaints, Vivian said softly. Over 14 years. It's not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. And the real question is not why I terminated her today. The real question is, why did This company let that pattern continue. For so long. Without consequence. That landed. She could see it. In the way the crowd shifted. In the small, uncomfortable glances. They knew. Deep down, almost all of them knew. They had seen Meredith's behavior. They had heard the complaints. So many of them, almost certainly, had been on the receiving end of it themselves. An older gate agent stepped forward. His face was lined by 38 years of customer service. "Miss Laurent," he said quietly. "I have seen a lot of owners and executives come through this airline. They all talked about culture. About values. About doing better. And nothing ever changed. How do we know you are different?" It was, she thought, the only question that mattered. She did not answer right away. She let the question sit in the air. She let it have its full weight. "You do not," she said finally. "Not yet. Words are cheap. Anyone can stand on this bench and make promises. What matters is what happens in the next 90 days. So, here is what I can tell you. You are going to see mandatory retraining for every customer-facing employee in this company. You are going to see a new reporting system that does not pass through your direct supervisors. You are going to see regular anonymous audits. Across every route. Every cabin. Every service tier. You are going to see consequences for employees who violate our standards. Regardless of seniority. Regardless of tenure. Regardless of how many years they have been protected." She paused. "And you are going to see transparency. About what we are doing. And about why we are doing it. But I cannot do any of this alone," she said. Culture change does not happen from the top down. It happens when every single person in an organization decides that the values we claim to hold actually matter. It happens when crew members hold each other accountable. When gate agents speak up. When supervisors listen, instead of dismissing. When all of you decide that treating people with dignity matters more than protecting colleagues who do not deserve protecting. A young flight attendant in the front row stepped forward. She had been on the flight. Her name was Jessica. Her eyes were full of tears. "I saw what Meredith did," she said. "I wanted to say something. I wanted to help. I was scared. I am still on probation. I thought, if I spoke up, I would lose my job." Vivienne looked at her for a long moment. Then she did something nobody in that crowd was expecting. She pulled out her phone. Opened her contacts. And read her direct office number aloud. "That," she said, "is my line. It goes straight to my desk. No assistant. No screening. No bureaucracy. You see something wrong. You call me. I do not care if it is 3 in the morning. I do not care if it seems small. You call." The crowd stirred. This was not normal. Owners did not give out their direct numbers to frontline staff. Owners maintained distance. Owners maintained hierarchy. Owners insulated themselves from the daily noise of the operation. "You are serious," someone said. Disbelief, plain in their voice. "Completely," she said. "I am not interested in being the kind of owner who sits in a tower issuing memos. I am interested in building an airline that actually works. And that means hearing, directly, from the people who know where the problems are." The press conference that evening was packed. Patricia begged her to use a script. Vivienne refused. They set up a single, open press conference. All networks. All outlets. No exclusives. No pre-approved questions. No talking points. She sat at a small folding table, her hands folded in front of her, a bottle of water she did not touch. The questions came fast. How long had she known about discrimination at Aura Airways? Had she set Meredith Sterling up? What was her response to claims that she was being vindictive? How many other employees would be terminated? What about the impact on shareholders? She answered every question directly. No spin. No deflection. Yes, she had suspected cultural problems based on her preliminary research. No, she had not set anyone up. She had simply given the employees an opportunity to do their jobs. And had documented what had happened. The claims of vindictiveness were coming from people who were trying to avoid accountability. The number of terminations would depend on the investigations. And shareholders, she said, would need to understand something fundamental. Short-term financial pain is the cost of long-term legitimacy. Then a reporter from a major network leaned forward. Miss Laurent, she said. You are a black woman who experienced racial discrimination on a flight you were operating as a secret shopper of a company you now own. How did it feel? Personally. To be treated that way. By employees of an airline you own. The room went silent. Every camera turned. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Vivienne was quiet, for a long time. She remembered the casual cruelty in Kyle's voice. The contempt in Meredith's eyes. The grip of fingers around her arm. The exhaustion of maintaining composure while being systematically degraded for 8 hours, in front of 100 strangers, on a flight she had paid for. It felt, she said slowly. Exactly the way it has felt every other time it has happened. Which is to say, it hurt. It was humiliating. It was infuriating. But it was not, in any sense, surprising. Because discrimination is not a rare anomaly that happens only in extreme cases. It is a daily reality. For millions of people. Who have to navigate systems that were not built for them. Who have to prove their worth, in spaces, where others are automatically assumed to belong. Her voice strengthened. The difference, this time, is that I had power. He had resources. He had the platform to fight back. And to force accountability. Most passengers do not have that. They experience exactly what I experienced. And they have no recourse. They can file a complaint, that gets dismissed. They can write a tweet, that disappears into the noise. They can choose not to fly the airline anymore. But they cannot force systemic change. That is what power gives you. Not freedom from discrimination. The ability to do something about it. When it happens. So. What are you going to do? The reporter pressed. Long term. Beyond the terminations. Beyond the policy changes. I am going to build an airline, Vivienne said, where no passenger ever has to experience what I experienced. Where service is determined by the ticket you purchased. Not by the color of your skin. Where employees are empowered to speak up when they see discrimination. Instead of being punished for it. Where accountability is not a line in a mission statement. But a practice. Enforced. At every single level. And if I can do that, here, at this airline, maybe other airlines will follow. Maybe other industries will follow. Maybe we can start to dismantle some of these systems. That have lasted, this long, only because the people in power found it easier, to live with them, than to challenge them. The press conference went on for another 40 minutes. When it ended, Vivienne was tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. She had relived the worst day of the year, on camera, in front of millions. She had defended her decisions against hostile questioning. She had laid bare her personal history, in front of strangers, with the kind of honesty that always cost something. When she checked her phone, that night, the response was already overwhelming. The video of the press conference had reached 8 million views by midnight. Comments flooded in from across the country. From people sharing their own stories. From employees at other companies, pledging to speak up. From customers committing, publicly, to fly Aura specifically because of what they had seen. The stock, which had dropped 14% in after-hours trading, recovered 6 points by morning. By the end of the week, it had returned to where it began. By the end of the month, it had broken its previous high. Investors had remembered something they often forget. Companies built on dignity outlast companies built on convenience. Always. Meredith was terminated for gross misconduct. The supervisor. The check-in agent Cal. The gate agent. Al terminated, in writing, with cause. Before the end of the week. Patricia pulled the file. 47 formal complaints had been filed against Meredith Sterling. Over 14 years. 47. All from passengers of color. All quietly resolved. All buried under the same code, in the same database, by the same handful of supervisors who had decided that protecting a 22-year employee was easier than protecting the people. Who had paid for the flights? BILLIONAIRE announced the reopening of every dismissed complaint from the previous 5 years. Investigations relaunched. Compensation offer. Apologies issued, with names attached, in writing. No anonymous corporate statements. Real apologies. From real people. To real people. 12 more employees were terminated in the months that followed. After the internal review found patterns of behavior that could not be explained. Or defended. 73 previously dismissed complaints were reopened. And properly investigated. The training programs were rebuilt from the ground up. A new reporting system was launched. Complaints would no longer travel up through the chain of command. They would go, directly, to an independent third party. That reported quarterly to the board. BILLIONAIRE gave out her direct office number to every employee in the company. 3,000 people. One number. No assistant. No screen. No bureaucracy. You see something wrong. You call me. The stock dropped 14% in the first 48 hours. The board panicked. BILLIONAIRE did not. 6 months later, the stock was up 22% above its pre-incident level. Customer satisfaction had reached a 10-year high. Employee retention had risen, especially among minority employees, where turnover had been highest. Discrimination complaints had dropped by 67%. Not because people had stopped reporting them. Because the behavior itself, in the daily texture of the operation, had begun, slowly, to die. 3 corporate clients expanded their contracts. Specifically citing the cultural overhaul. Investors who had panicked in week 1, were quietly grateful in month 6. It is funny, BILLIONAIRE told the assembled employees at a company-wide meeting, what people are willing to pay for, when you stop selling them a lie. She read, aloud, from an email she had received that morning. From a young black woman who had flown Aura the previous week. I flew first class for the first time in my life yesterday. I was terrified. I kept waiting for someone to question whether I belonged. To ask for extra identification. To treat me differently. None of it happened. The crew was professional. The service was warm. For the first time, ever, I got to just enjoy my flight. Without spending the whole flight proving I had a right to be there. I know that sounds small. It is not small. To me. Thank you for making Aura a place where people like me can feel welcome. BILLIONAIRE's voice did not break when she read it. But it slowed. That email, she said quietly, is why we did all of this. That is why we terminated employees. Overhauled policies. Spent millions on training and investigations. Because every passenger, every single one, deserves to have that experience. To board a plane and feel welcome. To pay for something and receive what they paid for. To exist, in a public space, without auditioning for the right to do so. The applause came slowly. A few hands at first. Then a wave that filled the room. Not everyone was clapping. Some sat with their arms crossed. Some, with eyes turned to the floor. Some had still not made up their minds whether they liked the new airline. And that was fine. Because culture change is slow. Culture change is hard. Culture change does not need everyone to be a believer in the first year. It needs only enough people, in enough seats, who understand that the alternative is worse. 6 months after the flight, Vivian returned to JFK. She booked herself onto flight 9-0-0-2, again. To London. The same route. The same seat. Though this time, she did not fly anonymous. Everyone in the airport knew who she was. Every employee who saw her, straightened up. Used a little. The gate agent greeted her warmly. Security flowed without incident. The lounge staff knew her. They treated her with the same calm professionalism they extended to every other passenger. When she boarded the plane, she was greeted by a new purser. A woman in her 40s, named Carmen. Promoted from economy. Because she had consistently received the highest customer service marks in the company. Miss Laurent. Welcome aboard. Can I get you anything before departure? Used water. Thank you. Vivian looked around the first-class cabin as the plane pushed back. A young black businessman in a sharp suit. An elderly Asian woman in a sweater. A Middle Eastern family with 2 small children. A white couple in their 30s, headed to a vacation. A teenager with bright pink hair and headphones, traveling alone. Carmen treated them all the same way. Courtesy. Professionalism. Genuine warmth. The kind of service every paying passenger had always deserved. And which, for so many years, had been quietly, systematically denied to some. And offered freely to others. This was what change looked like. Not perfect. Perfection was impossible. But measurable. Demonstrable. Better. And better, Vivian knew, was enough to build on. As the plane lifted off, and New York shrank below the wing into a quiet grid of light, she closed her eyes. She let herself feel something close to satisfaction. But only for a moment. Because she had not yet finished. There were still other companies. Other systems. Other workplaces. Other industries quietly running on the same broken assumptions. With the same protected employees. With the same buried complaints. With the same 47 file folders sitting in the same locked drawers. Waiting for someone to open them. She had built one roadmap. She had proven that it could be done. Now she would do it again. And again. And again. Because power without accountability is only a polite name for tyranny. And accountability without consequence is only a polite word for theater. She had spent her whole career proving something very simple. That the company could choose its values over its convenience. That a leader could choose her principles over her quarter. That the system could be challenged. And could be changed. And could, eventually, be made to serve the people it was supposed to serve in the first place. If she could do that at Aura Airways, she could do it anywhere. And she would. Because the silence, no longer belonged to her. It had never belonged to her. It had only been borrowed. By people who were afraid to ask for it back. Today, she had asked. Tomorrow, she would ask again. And the day after that. For as long as it took. For everyone who came after her. For every passenger, in every line, in every terminal, in every city, who had ever been told, quietly. With that thin smile and that practiced gesture, that they were standing in the wrong place. She would keep telling them, with the full, cold weight of everything she had built. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. And it is the world that has been standing in the wrong place. For far too long.